before the show starts, I just have something very quickly to say. It's with sadness that I heard of the passing of the presenter of the podcast shows Take It Away and Now Hear This, Ryan Brady. And Take It Away itself is seen by many people in the podcasting world, and particularly in the Beatles podcasting family, as a high benchmark. And for me personally, it was a show that was my first introduction to Beatles podcast. Through the show, I was introduced to Kit O Toole from Talk More Talk, and I believe Ed Chen from When They Was Fab, although I'm not completely sure about that last one. It was a really good show, and Ryan and his co-presenter Chris Mercer were incredible hosts that knew what they were talking about. They showed how to really dive deep into a subject, pulling apart the solo releases by Paul McCartney, and basically making sure that they hit everything without giving too much of an explanation, but just giving you enough explanation behind the stories of those songs and those albums and how they were made, who was on them, and these sort of things. And they also did really good interviews with people who've worked with Paul, such as Denny Lane, who was in Wings from day one until the end, and Lawrence Juba, who was a guitarist towards the end of Wings. They always had a almost professional feel to the show, and it's just sad to hear of somebody of this happening to such a nice guy. Personally, I've talked with the guy a number of times on the internet and through emails back and forth. He's supported me in this show that I'm doing, Pods Like Us, and we were actually due to record a show together. When this show goes out, we were due to actually record a show on the Tuesday, where I was going to talk to Ryan and Chris from Talk More Talk, and Ryan's co-host Paul, about their show Now Hear This. Ryan was a lovely guy, always giving a nice, always got really nice emails from him and messages from him. And also, about as a side, he was also the vice president of Atlantic Records, but that's... So rest in peace, Ryan, and condolences to his friends and his family. You'll be missed, and you really did make a mark on so many of us. Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv. Now, before we go into the main body of the show, I thought that I would thank people who have been kind enough to leave reviews for the show. Now, the truth is that for the most part, episodes are recorded far in advance, with half of the episodes for this present first season having been recorded before the show even started to be released. I've received some reviews from people, and that has been a sign to me that the show is resonating with some. Makes me feel much better about doing the show. So before we get on with the show, I thought I'd just give a shout out to the users known as Pookie Bear, Mississippi Indie Mew. I think that's probably supposed to be Mississippi Indie Music, but they ran out of characters. Glass Onion 75, who I think is actually Anthony Rotuno from the Glass Onion podcast, who I talked to in an episode earlier in the season. And the other person who's left a message is The Thick of It. And if that's the actor Peter Capaldi, then that's awesome, but doubtful. As a show that's only been going for a short while, any feedback is incredible. Anyway, now on with the main show, where by the magic of editing, we will go on to the final episode of Season 1, where I'll be having a general chat with some friends of mine. Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv. This time, for another change of pace, I'm joined by my friends Jennifer Longworth, who is an executive producer and editor for Bourbon Barrel Podcasting, and also a fellow songwriter who does lots of songwriting challenges, and Kit O Toole, who is from the podcast Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles podcast, and a writer for Something Else Reviews and Blinded by Sound. And she's also the writer of two books that everybody should have, which are Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours Through the Lesser Known Beatles Songs, and Michael Jackson FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the King of Pop. How are you both?
Doing well. Kit, you sound amazing. We're just meeting. What an awesome person I'm on here with.
Absolutely. Two awesome people. And I'll take the slack.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, and your credentials sound pretty amazing too, Jennifer, because I'm relatively new to the podcasting game, so I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about the podcast business as well. And Marv, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah,
it's great. It's lovely. I'm at last having a show with the queen of all Beatles media.
Oh, man. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed, for that one.
All his fault.
It is all of his fault. So what's everybody up to at the moment? Anything interesting?
Just editing podcasts, and got a new job, and I'm trying to figure out how to balance a day job with editing podcasts. So we're managing.
Kit writing any more books?
Yes, I am working on a couple. I'm working on one that's a collection of my other great musical love, which is soul and R&B. I've been working on that for a while. It's a collection of writings that I've done over the years for Blinded by Sound. And it's about, I define soul music pretty generally. So it's music from the 50s through probably the 90s, 2000s. And I'm also starting work on a sequel to Songs We Were Singing. So hopefully that will be out in the near future. Also working Monday, we'll be doing a new episode of Talk More Talk, and we'll be doing one on the 40th anniversary of John Lennon's passing, although we're going to be talking mainly about celebration of his life and discussing his legacy. So, and Al Sussman will be our special guest. many in the Beatles world know him, the executive editor of Beatle Fan Magazine. So it should be a really special episode. So looking forward to that.
That's great. So for everybody listening, when this episode goes out, that is that night when they'll be recording that show.
Yep, November 30th. Yeah.
November the 30th.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, what sort of podcast do you listen to, Kit? Music related?
Well, mainly, surprise, surprise, a lot of Beatles podcasts because, I know so many people in that sphere, and there's so many good ones out there that it's hard to keep up with them all, and so I mainly listen to ones like When They Was Fab with your friend and mine, Ed Chen and Lonnie Pena, the Fab Four Free for All, which was probably one of the first I ever listened to back when it was the Fab Forum, and changed its name to the Fab Four Free for All. Great discussion with some top Beatles experts. I've Got a Beatles Podcast is another one that I listen to for a bit more of an academic spin on the Beatles. And I've just recently gotten into one called Nothing Is Real, which is a podcast out of Ireland with two hosts. And I hope I'm pronouncing them correctly, Jason Carty and Stephen Cockcroft, and really intelligent discussion about Beatles and solo. I really recommend it. Just as I said, just recently started getting into that, but just a number of them. Things We Said Today, Fans on the Run, a new addition this year to the Beatles podcast sphere, Two Legs. If you're a Paul McCartney fan, that's a great one to listen to. As I said, there are just so many out there now, so it's hard to keep up with them, with all of them. But they're really all, excellent, and I think have really contributed so much to Beatles knowledge.
Okay. Do you listen to a lot of music podcasts, Jennifer?
No, I don't.
No, you don't.
I was like, music and podcasts, interesting. But I don't. No one pays me to edit those, so I don't listen to them.
This will be interesting, because I was going to say, why do you think there's such a popularity of podcasts about music?
Well, because music talks to everyone.
Yep.
Everyone can relate to music, and everyone has a favorite genre or a specific song that speaks to them. And if they find someone else who has that love, then there's an instant connection.
Yeah. And I think too that, like no other time, this is, before in fan communities, sure, you could get together in fan conventions or of course concerts and things like that, but and there were fanzines. I certainly remember those. Yeah. We all remember those, but there was no other way. If you couldn't have your own radio station or anything like that. That was unheard of. Now it is so easy to, and pretty inexpensive, to just set up a mini recording studio right in your house, and put together a podcast. Of course, not just about music, but there are podcasts, and I'm sure you could say more about this, Jennifer, but podcasts about virtually any subject you can think of. They're just, it's just exploding. It's just anybody can do it. Now, I'm sure that's good and bad that anybody can do it.
Yeah.
But it's really a new way that fans can connect, and there are some really good podcasts out there. that that really bring fans together, and where fans can express their opinions, and ones that are really good. I mean, really are extremely knowledgeable, and bring on guests. I mean, it's amazing how many guests, really well-known people will come on these podcasts, and so it's really brought a whole new dimension to fandom.
Because it doesn't stop at the podcast. The community continues outside of just listening too. And my favorite podcast, we have a Facebook group and then an offshoot group, and I know people from around the world because of a podcast.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's just phenomenal that, how, as I said, how it's grown, and today, I mean, it's funny because I mean, and again, Jennifer, you can speak to this better than I can, but it seemed like, in like maybe, I don't know, the late 2000s or maybe 2011 or so, there was like kind of the first explosion, and then there seemed to be a bit of a lull, and then it kind of exploded again, like, in the last few years. And I'm not quite sure why. It had that kind of, there was a little lull, and then now it's their podcasts, galore.
I think some of it has to do with celebrities starting podcasts. And people going, oh, well, the Obamas have a podcast now. I want to be like Michelle Obama. Let me do a podcast. If she can do it, I can do it, I think that has a little bit to do with that. I think also the barrier to entry is so low, and people are realizing that. And people, here in COVID, things have gone out of stock, because people are stuck at home going, well, what can I do at home? Wait, I can start a podcast.
I think it's made the media see it as a serious form of media in itself now, I think. So you've got radio stations that are accepting it more and are seeing it, because you've got people like the David Tennant podcast, which is really good, and things like that. I think it's made these people sit up and realize that, yes, this is something. And also general listeners now are thinking, oh, they're doing a podcast. I didn't know about that, because these people like David Tennant are advertising it on the Twitter page. And that's getting people to then listen to that because they're a fan of David Tennant. And because they're doing that, I think it's possible that then they're thinking, oh, what else is there out there for me to listen to? So, yeah, I think that's something that's helped towards giving it that big boost over the last few years.
Well, and I think, too, that, that talking about when you were saying celebrities and all, I think that other, in the terms of music, artists and all have recognized that, the number of people who listen to podcasts, because as I mentioned, more artists are going on podcasts to promote their albums and so forth, because they're realizing, hey, people actually, listen to these, and will go buy their, after listening to an interview, they'll go buy their albums. And so you'll see more of them willing to go on podcasts and be interviewed and everything. I mean, a number of, people I know who host podcasts, I mean, they can get some, pretty, not huge stars, but a number of well-known musicians. And you think, gosh, how did they get? And a number of them, I mean, they will go on these podcasts because they know if they've got a new album or a book or whatever to plug, they're smart. They think, hey, these podcasts have big audiences, and so they're happy to go on them to plug their latest book or album or whatever it is, because the audiences for these have grown so much.
They have. And also, I think, as we were talking before we started the show, 2020 with the COVID thing has been, awful and terrible. But on the other hand, I think that these artists and their management are probably looking at this as, well, here's another way that we can actually advertise. And because we can't go into studios and actually do like sessions in studios, it's only another like half an hour into that artist's time. So perhaps he can do some plugging on these shows. And I think because they are stuck at home, I think these artists and these celebrities are open to doing these things a lot more.
Absolutely. I mean, as an author, and I'm sure this is for any author, whether it's music or whatever. I mean, I'm going to be coming out with another book next year that I've co-edited with Ken Womack, and called The Beatles and Fandom. And one of the things that we're going to do to promote the book, we're hitting podcasts. I mean, absolutely. Because that's another thing with podcasts. I mean, you can hit targeted audiences.
Right.
You've got, that those audiences listening to those particular podcasts, I mean, they'll be interested in your book. And so absolutely. I mean, that is a natural way to market your book. And so that will be a big part of our marketing strategy. And Jennifer, I'm sure, you've seen that too, that the podcasts are becoming more and more of a marketing tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to encourage businesses to use it as such. So I have one of my clients is a realtor, and she interviews community businesses to promote them, but also to make herself as the community expert. So, going back to increasing your influence and your authority, you set yourself as the industry expert, as the authority, just through a podcast, because now she's not just a realtor, she's a realtor with a podcast, and just adding with the podcast there levels you up a little bit.
It helps build your brand. I mean, it really does. Absolutely.
And going back to what you were saying about finding your target audience, they say the riches are in the niches. And if someone's tuning into a Beatles podcast, then they're interested in the Beatles. You don't have to just throw out an ad campaign out into the void and hope that somebody who likes the Beatles sees it. You already have a captive audience.
You got it. Riches are the niches. I like that. I'm going to
isn't that great?
I like that.
And there are plenty of Beatles podcasts out there for you to go on and plug your book.
That's for sure. I mean, it's just amazing how they have, as I said, I mean, just the last few years alone, I mean, not just Beatles, of course, but just podcasts in general. I mean, it's just incredible how they've just exploded. But one thing, and Marv, I don't want to take over. This is your show, but I wanted to ask Jennifer something.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's
I don't want to take over your show, but
most guests talk more than I do.
No. But I'd love to ask somebody who's really experienced in podcasting, and now I've got one here, so I can't let this moment go. So Jennifer, so as I was saying, the good, and you said about there's kind of a low barrier for entry and all that. So what, now that there is this, that's a good and bad thing. So I guess what would you say makes a good, what are the qualities of a good podcast?
Well, I like good audio quality because I'm an editor, but that's not necessarily what makes a good podcast. You have to have decent audio quality to not scare off people who, I've turned shows off within the first 5 seconds if they sound like crap. So don't sound like crap, but you don't have to have a professional recording studio either. You have to have good content. Content is king. You have to have interesting content. And one of my friends says that, they come for the content, they stay for the host. So you have to be able to provide value and connect with your listeners. Because my favorite podcast is Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts me to sleep. And we recently did a little present for the hosts through the Facebook group, and people submitted little thank yous. And we had over an hour worth of thank yous for the hosts because people have bonded with them through listening to the podcast. So they come to Sleep With Me because they can't sleep, So I was like, well, I can't sleep. Here's this show that's supposed to put me to sleep. So they're coming to that for the content. But then once they're in it and see how vulnerable and raw and everything that Drew is, they're like, oh, okay. So now they love him and they're staying for him too and get behind him and everything. And it was pretty remarkable. But I edited the little tribute. So I got to hear all of them. It's not public. We kept it confidential, but I was the lucky one to hear them all.
Wow.
And it just the stories that people were telling you, like, oh my gosh, just because of a podcast. So I think, you have to have decent audio quality. You have to have good content, and you have to be a personable host. So.
Interesting. Yeah, because I just thought that was important when we were talking about that. I just thought that was an important follow-up because, it is great that it is easier to, host your own podcast now, but that's a good and bad thing. And so I just thought that was kind of an important follow-up to say that, yes, you can, yes, it's easier to create your own podcast, but there are a lot of, there are a lot of great ones and there are a lot of not so great ones.
Yeah, I think part of the not so great ones comes with people going, oh, I'm going to start a podcast, and they don't have a vision. They don't know who their audience is going to be. They don't know really what they're going to talk about after the first 5 episodes. They just get on the mic and start rambling with no direction. Those are not good podcasts. You have to have more of a direction and more of a plan before you even get started.
That is the truth.
I think something else that's helped with it is the fact that, in a way, podcasts are an extent of, well, not an extension as such, but I think they work in line with the social media. Mm-hmm. So you've got that contact between the podcast shows and the actual social media, because all podcasts have got their own social media pages, and there's always a back and forth there. I found with all the podcasts that I listen to, that if I go on their sites or their boards or their pages and I leave like a message, there is that back and forth between them, which before with like radio, a lot of the time you could ring into a radio station and they'd answer, but it was only the, like, every 100th phone caller or something would end up getting through, whereas there is more of a closeness, dare I say, intimacy between the actual people behind the show and their public because of this.
Absolutely. I think podcasts sometimes are a form of social media in themselves, depending on the show.
Yeah, and you've also got the thing that a lot of the shows are an extension of, like these Beatles podcast and podcast about other music and other, films and this, that, and that. That's an extension of the natural social getting together of people, where you get together with friends and you'd be discussing these subjects between yourselves, and you try to outdo each other on what trivia you've got. So one person will say, oh, I know this about that, and then another person will say, well, you know that, but I know this. And these podcasts, a lot of them are an extension of that, where they are people just generally doing that, but in a show.
Yep, and that's true. Although, with Talk More Talk, we try not to do that too much, because I found that one of the things when we were, and Jennifer, you brought up a great point about when you're planning a show. We really, when I co-host it with, there's 5 of us, although usually there's just 4 of us on camera. One of the other people kind of joins in periodically, but we really, we spent months planning the show out about what we wanted it to be and all. And one of the things that, we really wanted was audience involvement, because, some of the other podcasts I've listened to, I found were too like kind of insider. I mean, it was almost like the hosts were, and this is not any of the podcasts I mentioned earlier, so I'm not referring to any of them, but some others I've listened to, it's almost like the hosts are just talking to each other and almost forget there's an audience there. You know what I mean? I mean, they just forget that there's, that they're actually, I feel like I'm overhearing two people having a phone conversation or something, and there's insider jokes, and they're trying to, as you said, kind of one up people or one up each other with trivia and all. And I thought, I want the audience to know that, I mean, of course we know our stuff and we, we know our subjects well, but we really want to have a conversation with the audience. And so that's why initially we do our show live. It's a video cast. We do our show live. We really encourage audience, participation, discussion. We want to know what they think. We try to bring their comments into our show. And then when we put it up on YouTube afterwards, and then we put the audio version up on Podbean and, all the other places. And, but we, heavily encourage them to comment, and we respond to as many of them as we can. We really want to engage the audience and know that, let them know we're not just talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
We really want a dialogue with them. And that's something that I really value in a podcast, that the hosts, realize that there's an audience that they're speaking to, that they're not just doing it for themselves.
Yeah, that's something that rings true to me in a way. The way that I've been doing this show myself is because during this first season, because all the shows are pre-recorded, and I've only today acknowledged that, because of the fact that all the shows were pre-recorded for the most part. Mm-hmm. It's made me realise that it's lacked that side to it. So that's why from season 2, I'm planning on having more of these shows where it's a group chat, because then it's a way for me to then, before the show starts, I'll acknowledge that audience and have that dialogue with the audience, so to speak. So I've learnt that through just noticing that, and being somebody who listens to a lot of shows, I've thought, hold on, I'm missing this side of it. So that's something that I've thought I've got to do something about.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to do it live like we do. I mean, that's just one approach. I mean, most podcasts don't do that, but yeah, I think there are ways that and as both of you were saying, using social media to encourage audiences to interact, comment, that kind of stuff. And but yeah, just to really just acknowledging the audience and just letting them know that that you're broadcasting for them, there's an audience there. And as I said, there just have been a couple of podcasts that I've heard, and it just I don't know about you guys, but that just really turns me off when I hear a podcast and it's just like, I don't know, that there'll be two people there and they're just sort of talking to each other, and a lot of inside jokes and just.
Oh yeah, inside jokes are terrible for podcasts. Don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I just hate that. I just think they're just like, why am I listening to this?
Yeah.
I mean, why don't you guys just go to another room and just chit chat? I mean, you just feel like you're eavesdropping on a phone conversation or something. Like, I don't want to hear this.
Definitely. Anyway, touching on something from earlier, then, with the Beatles, they're still relevant to this day and age, even though they split up 50 years ago. So why do we think that there are certain acts like the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Rolling Stones, all these bands. Why do we think that they've got this sort of appeal that makes them relevant today to new listeners, whereas there's other artists that haven't got that have been left by the wayside?
Boy, that's it's a tough question because I've talked about this with other people too. That why have some artists had such a long-standing appeal and others haven't. I think with the Beatles, for example, there's just something about their music that just hasn't, it doesn't sound dated. And I think that's maybe a quality that, Michael Jackson's music has too. That the sound of it just doesn't sound, I mean, you don't listen to it and necessarily think like with Michael Jackson's music too. That's a better example. I don't know. You don't listen to it immediately think, oh, that's 80s. I mean, it's like you listen to Thriller something and you don't automatically think, boy, that's a really 80s sound. I mean, it just has a really timeless quality to it. And of course, one of the biggest tests is, I mean, you go to a wedding, you go to a wedding reception and somebody plays Thriller, the DJ plays Thriller or Billie Jean, and everybody gets on the floor. I mean, it just has that timeless quality to it. And I think universal themes help a lot too. I think in music of like the Beatles and Michael Jackson and others, I think, if you have those kind of, universal themes, whether it's, love or, in some cases, sort of fight the power kind of messages, timeless messages that they're not dated, they're never going to go away. I mean, John Lennon's Imagine, that song resonates through generations. That helps too. I just think, and also, of course, nostalgia. I think people love feelings of nostalgia, so I think that is another factor. And certainly with the Beatles, for first generation fans, that's a huge factor. Is they love feeling the nostalgia. But for me though, because I don't have that. I don't know. It's just, to me, they just have a timeless sound. It's just not dated. Whereas you hear some other bands from the 60s, which I still love, but you think, yeah, that sounds like the 60s. I mean, you just hear one note and you're like, yeah, that's, I can tell that's the 60s. Yeah. And the Beatles somehow don't sound like that.
No, and you've also got a thing, I think, sometimes where some songs you date them if you mention things like I don't know, if you mention something that's time specific, like even if you mention technology from that time or a way that if you mentioned in a song back in the 80s or 90s, or I'll page you, then that automatically dates it. You're like, or I'll send you a fax. That would automatically date that song. Do you know what I mean? I can't think of any songs off the top of my head that do that. But
fax me a beer.
Yes, but there are songs that have done that over the years where that will automatically. It's almost like songs where you'll say, "Leave me a message on the answer phone," and you'll think, well, people don't have answer phones now. They have an answer service on their mobile phone, so everybody's got a mobile phone, and it's perhaps that could be something that dates things and makes them less relevant. I don't know.
I think another aspect of timeless bands and stuff are the remakes of their songs, which are also popular, which just kind of shows you that it goes beyond the band sometimes. Even Smooth Criminal has been remade, and the remake is good too. Yep. I'm not going to say it's better than. some people might, but I'm not, because I like Smooth Criminal. It's one of my favorite MJ songs.
I prefer Michael Jackson's version, but yes, I like both. But yeah,
me too.
But even that song remade, it's like, okay, great. And I knew Beatles songs because they were sung by other artists before I knew them. Growing up in the 80s, I'm like, because there was a lot of remakes, and I learned them, and also how they appear in culture anyway. That they're used as popular culture. It goes beyond just this. It's like if it goes beyond just a song, that's what makes it timeless. I can't think of any examples of that, but
no, that's a really good point about remakes. That is a really good point because, I mean that definitely helps to keep the artist's music alive and shows that. That the song is timeless. Like, I'm an 80s kid too. And, I mean, like, just as you were saying that, one song that popped into mind was, Simply Red had a hit with, like, If You Don't Know Me By Now.
Absolutely.
By, Harold, originally done by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. And, I remember hearing that song back then, and that made me want to go back to find the original. And
I did exactly the same thing.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And I'm since, then became a huge fan of Philly Soul. I absolutely love Philly Soul. And that led me down the rabbit hole of going into that. And I'm, as I said, humongous fan of that era. And, and you find out what great stuff that was. But yeah, it just shows you what a great song that was because, that it was a hit. It was a hit all those years later. And it's not that different. I mean, both versions are not that, it's not that drastically different. But that's a really good point. I think, that if a remake can be, as almost as big a hit as the original, it does kind of show the staying power of that song band. So good point.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and a good song to choose to get that point across as well. Because some people you might hear a cover version of a song, and the great thing is when you hear that cover version and somebody mentions to you that it is a cover version, or you find out that it is, and then if you go down that rabbit hole of thinking, I'll have a listen to the original version, and the great thing is that when you do that, you suddenly get hooked on the original artist and their music as well. That gives it a lasting power as well, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I remember when the movie When Harry Met Sally came out, and I bought the soundtrack, and it was Harry Connick Jr. and he was covering all these the Great American Songbook kind of, and that made me want to go back and listen to Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett and everything. And I will always be grateful to Harry Connick Jr. for making me do that because, now, I mean, I totally understand why everybody loves Frank Sinatra. And I became a big Sinatra fan after that and a huge fan of the Great American Songbook. I mean, it's, those talk about timeless. I mean, those songs sounded, that was a great example of, hearing them in that movie. And as a high school senior, when I saw that movie, I remember thinking, wow, these songs are great. Wow, I got to listen to more of this. And so I bought the soundtrack, but then that made me want to say like, hey, I think my parents used to talk about Frank Sinatra doing these songs. I think I'm going to check that out. And then went down that rabbit hole, then Nat King Cole and, so it so again, just shows you how timeless those songs are too.
Dear me. As an aside, I was introduced to the song All the Way by, it's a funny one, this. It was in an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and it was sung by James Darren.
Really?
And I heard that and I thought, what a beautiful song. And he did It's Only a Paper Moon on there as well. And I thought, I'm sure that Frank Sinatra's done that on it's probably on an album that I've not got by Frank Sinatra. And I've got a few compilations by him, and that's how I was introduced to those songs. And I fell down the rabbit hole through that, which is a strange way to come across those sort of songs, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, look at how probably many of us were, first exposed to classical music through cartoons,
Yep. Yep.
Bugs Bunny in the orchestra, yeah.
Yep. So whatever it takes, right?
Absolutely. But yeah, all of this as well, that having it on television shows and films and even cartoons, that keeps it relevant as well. I'm reminded of what your colleague Ken Michaels on Talk More Talk says, that always try to keep the music relevant by always, which is why he likes the idea of compilations, because it every so often it brings that music back to possibly to a younger audience. It makes it relevant to them.
Absolutely. I remember when, and I'm sure you do too, when the Beatles One compilation came out in 2000. I couldn't believe how many of my friends bought that compilation and were acting like they had just discovered this music. I mean, it was just so funny to me. I mean, really, but hey, if that's what it takes, that's great. I mean, really. And I'm sorry, I have to go back to when we were talking about the 80s. I remember in high school when Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out and Twist and Shout was used in that movie. And a number of my friends, I was kind of the weird kid in high school that Beatles when, it was all like pop and beginning of hair metal and all that stuff. And that movie came out and Twist and Shout was used. And I mean, a number of my friends were like, whoa, what is this? And started buying the 45 of that. And, and I think the record actually went back up the charts because of that. And it was just so funny to me that, that they had like just quotes discovered the song. But again, whatever it takes, whether it's a compilation, a movie, whatever, that introduces new people to the music, that's great.
Do you think the way that the music's made, do you think that is, or produced, do you think that helps with the longevity of the music, how it appeals to people?
I think so. I mean, I'm very much, I'm and Ken, talking about Ken Michaels, he's probably, when he hears this, he's going to roll his eyes because he always,
he'll be gritting his teeth.
Yeah, he'll be gritting his teeth, rolling his eyes. But I'm very much against like overproduction. And I think the more, the more overproduced it is, in my opinion, the more it dates it. And I'm very much for tasteful, minimal production. And Twist and Shout is a great example of a record that is not overproduced.
It's completely live.
Exactly. It is just straightforward rock and roll. And I think that's why to this day, talking about wedding receptions, when that record is put on and everybody gets out on the floor, it is just, as I said, straightforward rock and roll. Everybody sings along. It is a timeless record. And I think that's why it's not dated. Even though, it was recorded in the early 60s, it still has, it just still has relevance. People still love that record. So, whereas now, as I said, you guys, I'm an 80s kid too, but, some of the records from the 80s are a bit overproduced. And so it dates them. And I still love them. I mean, they bring back great memories, but it does date them a bit. And so, some of them haven't aged as well as others. So sorry, Ken, but overproduction doesn't do records favors in terms of, of making them timeless.
It's funny because you've reminded me by talking about Twist and Shout, and it's basically, its parent album, Please Please Me, that whole album was recorded live. It's basically a live album without an audience there. It reminds me of my favourite Van Halen album, which is the first album, which itself was just basically them going into a studio and just doing it there and then on the spot, because they were so used to that material that's there. And like I said, that's my favourite Van Halen album. It's got that urgency and that rawness, just like Please Please Me has.
Yep, exactly. Now I know you both are songwriters, so so I don't know if what I'm saying is making you both cringe, but but because there are some records like talking about the Beatles, some people would say, well, what about Sgt. Pepper? Because there is some elaborate production on there. So like Day in the Life and that kind of thing, but I don't know. That was done tastefully, in my opinion. That was done very. George Martin, I think, did that very, very skillfully. Somehow that just does not sound overproduced to me. But Phil Spector, that's always an issue I have with him. To me, a lot of stuff sounds overproduced. But that's me.
That's a strange one, because I also have a problem with Phil Spector a lot of the time as well with his production. I think it's over the top, but at the same time, Brian Wilson, who was very much a fan of Phil Spector, his productions of the Beach Boys, they haven't got that same feel to them as Phil Spector has, and I can't quite understand why that is.
That's a good point. That is true.
You know what I mean, Kit?
Yep.
The Beach Boys songs, they don't sound like they're overproduced. They sound just like they've hit the right point where they need to stop and not go any further than that. But it's almost like Phil Spector with his productions. He goes further than he should be doing.
That is really true. That really makes me think. Because, somehow Brian Wilson does not go over the line. You're right. Yeah, and Phil Spector just always I know it. I'm sure there are going to be some Phil Spector fans listening to this now who are going to say, "How dare you?" But
I like the songs that Phil Spector has produced.
Mm-hmm.
I like the songs in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that they're slightly too far.
Yes, but you're right. Brian Wilson somehow never crossed that line. You're right.
No, which I think that gives the music that lasting relevance to people, where they listen to it, and it makes it important today as it was back then.
Yep, that's why Pet Sounds is still considered one of the greatest albums ever made. Yep, because it's parts of it. Yes, it's still. You still listen to it and you think, okay, that's some of it's 60s, but it still sounds ahead of its time in many ways too, and the melodies are timeless, and so I think and that's an album that has really grown on me as the years have gone on. To me, it's gotten even better and better. So, I've appreciated it more and more.
But it's a strange thing, because like you said, you've got the almost live feel of things like Twist and Shout, but then you've got the produced of the Beach Boys. So how do those two completely different sides of the production coin, how are they still relevant now, more than 50 years later, even though they're from different types of production and different feel and everything?
That is a tough question.
It really is.
It really is. Because, Good Vibrations, which is, of course, we all still love that. That song comes on and
to stick songs in my head for the rest of the day on this podcast. That's the problem with talking about music. I'm like, oh, great. Well, that song's going on.
But that's.
I'm sorry, Jennifer.
Sorry.
No, but that's
like, oh,
but
man.
that's a good point, Jennifer. That these songs stick in your head. That's it.
Yep.
I mean, that's it. I mean, good vibrations sticks in your head. That is what makes them timeless. I mean, that is it. That's whether it's, we're talking about Twist and Shout as straightforward rock or Good Vibrations as being a more elaborate production. That's what it comes down to, though. It is exactly that. They stick in your head. That's
why are these songs earworms?
Yeah.
Why did they do that?
Well, they've got their choruses are catchy as hell. And you can sing along to them.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, we were just acknowledging what you were saying.
Oh, sorry. But no, but they're catchy. You can sing along to them. To paraphrase Dick Clark, back on American Bandstand, they've got a great beat and you can dance to them. I mean, really, I mean, sometimes that's what it comes down to. I mean, that sometimes is what it is. The barest elements of songs, but I mean, you kind of nailed it there, Jennifer. I mean, that's it. They stick in your head. They're earworms.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody the other day about is another group that have relevance or an audience today as well that have stayed by, which would be the Carpenters.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about those, and I was saying about I think when people do some songs that are famous that were by the Carpenters, I think if you do them a different way, they might not hit that mark quite like that. And I said that's probably because some of the sadder songs that they do, because they've sweetened it by doing all that multi-tracking, which is the signature of the Carpenters. I think that is something that's actually kept their music relevant and makes people still love that music, the music of the Carpenters now.
Well, I also think too, I mean, Karen Carpenter's voice is just, one of a kind. I mean, for me, when I hear their music, I mean, her voice is just so distinctive and you instantly know it's her. And I think for, just for me personally, because I like some of their stuff. I don't like it all, but for some reason, as you said, I mean, because some of it, as you mentioned, is, some of their material is quite sad, but her voice just carries it through. There's a sadness to it, but there's a sweetness to it. I've just never heard another voice like hers, and she just can she just grabs your attention immediately. And I think a good part of it is that multi-layered tracking, as you mentioned. That definitely is a big part of it, because that's another, as you said, a trademark. But also, boy, I don't know if they could have made it like they did without her voice. I mean, that is such a key part of their sound.
Absolutely. Mind you, you've already mentioned Michael Jackson with Thriller and things like that.
Well, you know what? I was actually just thinking about this the other day, and because this is some music that I think was not thought that it would last the test of time, but it has. I was running errands, and the Bee Gees came on. How Deep Is Your Love? And okay. I was, thinking about that because, of course, they were part of, that phase of the Bee Gees. It's part of the disco movement. And of course, everybody, the whole disco sucks thing happened, and there was this backlash. But I think, though, ultimately, now I know their early stuff has certainly stood the test of time. But I think ultimately, though, the disco era Bee Gees has definitely lasted the test of time. And How Deep Is Your Love is one of the great ballads. And, I think, even though it's part of that era, I still think ultimately, their songwriting was just so good, and their harmonies, and the production. Going back to that, I think the Barry Gibb's production was just so good, really impeccable. And as I said, the songwriting, the hooks they had, so I think even though there was, that backlash, there was the oversaturation of disco, I think in the end, I think now they are considered timeless.
Yep. I think what helps things like the Bee Gees is the fact that they lasted through that, because there wasn't just the disco element to them. There were lots of other elements to the band. Mm-hmm. A bit like going back to Thriller, you've got different types of music there, because you've got the rock riffs of Beat It, Eddie Van Halen and Steve Lukather and the Toto guys and that. So I think because you've got all that in there, I think that lessens the potential for it dating as well, because you've got so many different influences there in their music. Even in the so-called disco songs of the Bee Gees, mm-hmm. you've got different elements there from all sorts of music.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that is a good point that makes an artist that lasts is variety. That's true. That is a really good point. Is variety. If you tend to stay in one lane for your entire career, that doesn't last so long.
Yep. And the same goes for other bands as well. I mean, I'd say the same for a band like Queen, who are still relevant now. That's why they made that biography film about Freddie Mercury, because their music always changed over the years as well. They never stuck to that one thing, and they always mixed the different elements together.
That's true. Yeah. But I remember, years ago, I mean, there are a couple of songs you hear from Queen that you can't believe. Like I remember when I heard You're My Best Friend many years ago, and I didn't know that was Queen. I mean, so that's always amazing when you hear certain bands and the Hollies too. I remember that the Hollies really, that there are certain songs that don't sound like them at all. I mean, it's really amazing how they can change their sound. Talk about variety. Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, with You're My Best Friend, you've basically got a Motown single there.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't believe, when I was, much younger, I was like, that's Queen, Yeah, I was shocked.
But a lot of those songs that John Deacon of Queen wrote, they've got that sort of soulful, almost funk edge in places as well. All of his songs have got those.
Yeah.
And then you'll get big rockers, you'll get the overblown epics as well. So again, you've got artists there who are willing to mix the genres, which like we've both said, I think that helps with the longevity of a band's influence and fandom.
Yep, that's for sure. Absolutely. So it's just, I guess so. There are a lot of factors that go into a band's longevity. That's for sure. I mean, so it's beyond just a catchy hook. That's for sure. I mean, it's goes into, it's about the variety of, of the band's material. It's the production. It's the sound. It's the variety of sounds. I mean, it's a lot of different things.
Yeah, and you've got the same. Going back to the Beatles, that's the same with the Beatles. They were influenced and inspired by all different types of music. I mean, Twist and Shout was it Isley Brothers?
Yes, that was originally the Isley Brothers. Yeah.
So that's an old R&B number that they've rocked up.
Yep.
So they were influenced by that. They were influenced by rock and roll itself. You've got country elements that mainly were probably George and Ringo initially. They were both very country.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got R&B, well, even the blues itself as well back in the day. So they've got multiple influences there that they threw into their music and music hall as well.
Oh, I was going to say music hall. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of everything. It's just amazing how many influences they had. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and there were, I'm sure I've had, because we're kind of used to it being longtime fans, but I've had people, more casual fans say to me, like, they'll hear a song and say, like, that's the Beatles, so it's kind of a similar thing that they have so many different, sounds and they don't sound like the same band. So it's, because they have so many different influences and have tried so many different genres.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine years ago, he came to visit me, and I had the White Album on by the Beatles in the background, and he walked in as Helter Skelter started up, and he's a heavy metal fan, and he's like, whoa, what's this? And I'm saying, no, it's the Beatles' White Album. He's like, no way.
Yeah, that's the song that usually shocks, casual fans. Yeah, they're like, that's the Beatles? You're like, yep.
And then they get even more shocked when you tell them that it's Paul.
Yeah, exactly. True enough.
Yeah, but Paul's the ballad guy and the guy that writes all the old timey-wimey stuff.
Exactly. You're like, no. Surprise, surprise.
Absolutely. Oh dear. Are you there, Jen? Are you okay still?
I'm here. I just don't have anything to add, so I'm just
I know,
listening.
and you sounded very busy in the background.
I tried to turn my mic off so you couldn't hear me dealing with my cats.
Oh, your cats.
They kept coming in and out and in and out and in and out.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay.
You would have a big fan in Ken Womack with the cats, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes, you would.
Well, when you watch, I have a live podcast, the Podcast Editor Mastermind show, and we do a live broadcast every other week, and somebody's cat is going to show up in the video. Every time. Somebody's cat. 3 of us have cats. 3 of the 4 have cats, and somebody's cat is going to show up and interrupt the show. That's a given.
Yep. When we do our live shows, sometimes when Ken Womack's able to join us, he'll be talking, and then all of a sudden, cat will walk it right in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way that you'll miss Gertie in that.
Nope. He does this.
Sorry, that's an in-joke.
Yep, he does this series with one of his cats named Gertie, and he's like Ken is like the king of Photoshop, and he will Photoshop Gertie into like famous scenes of history, and so he calls it,
nice.
and he has it like you have to find her in the picture. It's kind of like Where's Waldo.
Where's Waldo? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And he does so. It's what does he call it? Gertie, cat witness to history, and he photoshops her, and I mean sometimes it's really hard to find her. I mean he's really good at this.
I can scratch my head for absolutely almost an hour or something. Sometimes I'm thinking, where is that darn cat?
I know. I finally threw in the towel once and wrote on there and said, for God's sake, somebody just show me where she is, because I've been staring at this forever and I'm getting a headache.
Oh.
And so finally he gave me a hint, and I'm like, thank you. I can sleep now. So yes, you and Ken you guys would get along very well.
Absolutely. And Ken has written a boatload of books as well.
Oh yes. He has written a ton of books, that's for sure. Yeah, really. I don't know how he does it.
Anyway, I think that was a good chat, I do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Jen, have you got any advice for your advice corner?
Well, we touched on a lot of it earlier in the show. So I'm like, okay, what did I not touch on or what? But I'll just reiterate what we talked about earlier is going into it with a plan and not just rambling on the mic, because what makes a good content or a good podcast, a lot of is the content and a relatable host. So just inside baseball going back and forth between you and your buddies just for fun on a microphone, that doesn't make a good podcast. So go into it with a plan and don't just ramble.
Are there any podcasts you would recommend listening to, about podcasting? Like if you're
Yes, absolutely. School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson is number one. The schoolofpodcasting.com. You can find out more there. Refer Dave to people all the time because he's a podcast coach. So he actually has the School of Podcasting. So you can take classes from him and get some coaching in addition to just listening to the show. So that's also, if you want the geeky stuff and really dig into stuff, I recommend The Feed, the official Libsyn podcast. Libsyn is one of the media hosts out there, and they'll give you stats and what's going on in the industry and lots of good stuff like that. So The Feed and School of Podcasting.
Okay, thank you very much. Have you got any podcasts that you'd suggest to people, Kit?
Basically, all the ones that I mentioned, the ones that the Beatles podcasts that I listen to regularly, that many of my friends host. As I mentioned, Fab Four Free for All, Two Legs, When They Was Fab. I've got a Beatles podcast, Things We Said Today, Fans on the Run. Nothing is real. I'm sure I've missed some that I've unintentionally omitted, and I apologize if I have. There are so many great Beatles podcasts out there. I encourage you all to check them out if you're a Beatles fan or solo Beatles fan. And of course, you can check mine out. Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast.
Okay, and as a bit of a advertisement for people, we are actually going to do a special episode of Pods Like Us during the season break, where me and Ed Chen are inviting people from other Beatles podcasts to take part in a special group chat all about Beatles podcasting.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. So anyway, Kit, where can people find you, and can you give them information on Talk More Talk and anything else that you're doing?
Sure. You can find me on Facebook. My professional writer page is Kit O Toole's Keynotes, so you can look that up. You can also find my website, kitotoole.com. As for Talk More Talk, you can find us on Facebook. Just look up Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. We broadcast every other Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can also find us on our YouTube channel, and we put up the live episodes after we've finished broadcasting. And please subscribe, and you can be notified of all our new episodes. You can also listen to the audio version of our broadcasts on Podbean and virtually any other podcasting platform you can imagine, wherever you prefer to get them. And please subscribe there as well. And I think that's everything.
Thank you very much. And Jennifer, any way that people can get in touch with yourself?
My website is bourbonbarrelpodcasting.com. My handle across social media is at KY Podcasting because I'm in Kentucky. So KY Podcasting. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, all the places. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not active on Twitter these days. I just kind of have gotten busy with other things and haven't been paying attention to my poor little Twitter, but
me too.
That's right. It's like I was really good on Twitter for a while, but not recently.
While we're at it, since you mentioned that show that you do, is it every fortnight? You can let people know about that as well.
Yeah, what's called the Podcast Editor Mastermind. And you can find us at podcasteditormastermind.com. I forget if it's editors or editor mastermind, so try both. And we're about every other Thursday. With the holidays, it would have been yesterday, but we skipped it because it was American Thanksgiving. So we'll be back on track in December. And there's 4 of us, or we have a guest, and we rotate out, and we talk about the business side of podcast editing, not necessarily the tech stuff, but like we're talking about goal planning, or we had someone on about marketing. I think we've had that on a couple times. We've talked about possibly getting someone on about bookkeeping, but we haven't done that yet. But things that editors need to consider as business owners. So that's what we try to talk about. So Podcast Editors Mastermind.
Great.
Okay, and you can find Pods Like Us by doing a search on Instagram, and we have a Facebook page as well. And also, not that I check it very often either, you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/Martin Quibell. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this chat, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us. Copy link. Get some people invited over. Do.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Kit. I'll take it off mute so you can hear me. Okay.
How are you?
Nervous now that I've got a professional.
Oh, hardly.
Yes, terrible news about Ryan.
Oh my God, I'm shocked.
So am I. Yeah.
I mean, geez. Yeah, I was on their show once, and and they were, I mean, of course, I didn't get to see, meet Ryan in person, but yeah, I mean, was really a nice guy, and wow.
Yes.
Just absolutely shocking.
Yeah, I was only talking to him. Oh, must have been Tuesday, I think, because we're supposed to be recording on next Tuesday.
Oh my God! Wow.
He's supposed to be on Pods Like Us next week, him and Chris, but obviously not now.
Yeah. Oh my God!
Nice guy.
Oh yeah, he was really a nice guy, and I had a lot of fun on their show. I went to Chris actually lives in Chicago.
Okay.
And teaches at Northwestern University. And so I went there to, record with him. And of course, Ryan's in LA. And so, he was recording there. And we had a great time. And I mean, it was, I just was stunned to find that out last night. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez. I mean, boy. You just never know.
No.
Sorry, it's getting kind of a small group, but here in the U.S. it's Thanksgiving weekend, so it's harder to get people.
Yes, I've realised that. I've picked the wrong weekend to record a group chat.
Yeah, that's why.
I should have done it last week and done the episode with Ed. Have that come out on Monday instead.
Oh no, that's all right. But I bet that was fun to do. He's a good guy.
Ed is a lot of fun. Yes. Yes. I think he's picked up on episodes before where I've said about we've all mentioned that Ed is like the great editor.
Yeah.
He's really good at editing shows together.
Yeah, he is. He really is. Yeah, because that's something that, I haven't really done a lot of, when I put the shows out, I don't do a ton of editing with our live shows because when I, put them out on YouTube and on the, audio, because they're really just doesn't need to be a ton of editing, but and we don't use music.
Yeah.
I don't want any trouble, so I stay away from that.
I do music, so I met her through doing songwriting challenges.
Oh, cool!
Online, which is different.
Nice.
At least it's given me 2 good theme tunes anyway, one for the front and back. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great. Well, and you've been great with full steam ahead with me already. You're done with your first season.
No, I'm shocked. Really am, and I've already done 3 episodes for the next one as well.
Jeez. See, I mean, you're just full steam ahead.
I know, yeah.
That's great.
Yep. So I've got Ethan's bad language to edit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had to tell him, and he'll be on Talk More Talk at some point, and I'm gonna. Yeah. I've told him, and that's like it's a family show, Ethan.
They do. It's the year that we can't wait to be over with.
Exactly. Good Lord. Honestly. But well, and whenever you want us, just let me know, and we'll I know it's hard to get all of us, but we'll do the best we can, and pin us all down for for an interview.
Yeah, or even if I get the majority of you, it's better than nothing. And
exactly.
Even do a show with other people from the show or something.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if we can't get all of us, it's as many as possible. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. So long as I get at least the 3 Musketeers.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 Musketeers.
I don't know where that came from.
I like that. Yeah, it's hard to believe we've been doing that for a couple of years now. It's really time really flies.
Yeah, and thinking about it, it must be taught more. It must be take it away then that I was introduced to you for the first time, and wasn't Ed on it as well at one point?
I think he was. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not. He probably was. No, it probably was. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was really a fun show to be on, and they kept you on your toes. I mean, they did. They knew they knew their stuff.
They did. Anyway, one good thing to come from 2020 is the new McCartney album when we eventually get it.
That's right. Yep. And in fact, I before I came on here, I was messaging with the guys because we're thinking about, with our every other week schedule, we normally do an episode December 14th, but we're thinking about bumping that to December 21st so we can review the album because good old Paul messed with our schedule.
I know. How dare he? If it was the week when it was supposed to come out, yeah.
We had it all set up. And, thanks, Paul.
He must have forgotten your schedule and got the weeks wrong.
Exactly. That's all we can figure.
Yep. Yeah, it's like Ed said, eventually he's going to Paul will end up coming on all of your shows as well. That's what we need.
He better. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
He owes us.
He does, especially with changing the dates.
Yeah, exactly. He totally messed up our schedule. So, so now he owes us and all the stuff we've bought. I mean, Tom alone, all the. There she is.
Here I am.
Hello, Jen. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you? Sorry for the delay.
That's okay. No problem. We're just chatting.
Great.
As it is, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
happy
Tom,
belated birthday.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much.
Yes, happy birthday.
Carrot cake for my birthday cake.
Nice.
Yum. And hi, Jennifer. Nice to meet you.
You too, Kit.
Yeah, the only thing that 2020 has not helped with the Beatles is it's pushed all the other stuff out to 2021, I suppose.
Yeah, the Let It Be stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got the box set, of course, the new documentary, the remastered documentary, the book, all that stuff.
Yep, and of course, have they said actually whether Plastic Ono will be January, or is that announcement coming in January? That's a bit of a strange one that they've put up there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I just got the book the other day, but yeah, supposedly the box set was coming out, in December, but yeah, we haven't heard a word about it, so I don't know if that's happening.
I'm sure Ken will find out before anybody else.
That's right. Ken always has the inside scoop.
He does. He does. Okay. Let's have a look. Whew. How did that go? What do you think?
I thought it went well. Sorry I got silent, but I was listening and I had absolutely nothing to add. Okay. I was like, they are doing fine without me. I turned my mic off and chased my cats out of the room, and a cat ran out from under the bed. I was like, oh, hi. So I hope you didn't hear any of that.
That's I thought we did really well. I was a bit worried before.
That was an interesting conversation.
Definitely.
I'm glad I had something to add here and there, because when I looked at the topic and thought about it, I'm like, I do not have anything to add on this at all. I got nothing.
When you said that,
and I was glad I could selfishly ask some questions, because I'm.
Go on, Kate. Go on.
Yep.
No, I was saying I was glad I could selfishly ask some questions about podcasting, because I'm still learning. And so I was like, well, now that I've got you here.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to talk about podcasting anytime.
So yeah, that was great.
I think you do a great job with the podcast and getting it out there, Kate.
Well, yeah, but I'm, still learning some skills, and I mean, I was kind of learning. I had done a little bit of research on my own before, as I thought about getting into podcasting some years before, and then, it just didn't happen. And then, in 2018, when a couple of the guys approached me about doing Talk More Talk, I then started researching it again, and luckily it had gotten a little easier to do podcasting by that time. So like I think when I first started looking into it, I don't remember Podbean existing, and it was I remember things like FeedBurner and things like that. I don't remember.
Good old FeedBurner. I used Podbean with FeedBurner to do multiple shows back in the day.
Man. Wow. Yep. I just remember it like years ago being a little more complicated, and now it's much easier, and so it's so I've been kind of learning on my own, but yeah, I was curious about finding out about podcasts about podcasting, because I thought, hey, I always want to pick up some tips and all that. So so that was
School of Podcasting. Totally listen to that. She Podcasts is good, but
okay.
School of Podcasting is top notch.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And he's out every Monday. He releases an episode every Monday.
Oh, that's great. So great. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies. I'll leave you to your day. That was brilliant. Thank you for chatting with me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marv. And nice meeting you, Jennifer.
You too. Hi.
All right.
Thank you very much. Take care.
You're most welcome. Bye-bye.